Pause for a moment, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see yourself and the person who once manipulated your mind. Have you ever felt like you were drowning in a relationship where everything revolved around them? Have you ever asked yourself, am I going crazy just because they were so good at twisting your reality? If you've ever tried to heal someone who never wanted to change, then this video is for you. Today, we're not here to analyze the narcissist. We're here to reclaim your power. I'm going to share with you 7 powerful psychological tactics that will leave them confused. But more importantly, you'll learn how to protect yourself ethically, intelligently, and with calm strength. No shouting, no arguments, just timely, precise actions. And you'll witness the shift. If you've ever been emotionally manipulated, if you feel like you lost yourself in a chaotic relationship, then don't look away. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to discover won't just help you understand the narcissist better, it will help you become the strongest version of yourself. Watch until the end, because the final part is when you'll realize victory doesn't come from making them suffer. It comes from your freedom. Part 1, the power of silence when you refuse to play their game. You won't defeat a narcissist through arguments. You won't awaken them with heartfelt words, but you can throw them into chaos with something that seems deceptively simple. Silence. Not because you have nothing left to say. Not because you're giving up, but because you've awakened to the truth that your reactions have been the fuel for their power games. Every time you tried to explain, cried, or defended yourself, you unknowingly handed them more power, feeding their empty ego and desperate need for control. They don't need you to understand them. They need you not to understand yourself. Because when you're confused, you're easy to manipulate. When you're angry, you're easy to lead. And when you're explaining yourself, they know they still have control. But when you choose silence, no arguing, no emotional outbursts, no lowering yourself to offer a final explanation, you send a message more powerful than any words ever could. I see clearly now, and I'm done playing. The narcissist feeds on emotional reactions. They don't need love, they crave attention. And it doesn't matter whether that attention is positive or negative, if you're still reacting, they still live rent-free in your mind. The more you speak up, the more power they gain. The angrier you get, the more important they feel. But when you choose silence, you suck the oxygen out of the fire they desperately try to ignite. And when the fire dies, they begin to panic. Silence is not a passive act. It is a deeply intentional psychological strategy. You're not silent because you're weak. You're silent because you're strong enough not to engage in a meaningless battle. You don't need the last word. You need peace. And sometimes that peace only arrives when you refuse to participate in the chaos they create. They'll try to pull you back in with fake apologies, blame shifting, or guilt tripping. But you don't respond. You don't need one more conversation. You've had enough. Your silence is not distance. It's a return to yourself. In the beginning, it will be hard. You may feel cold, even cruel, because you were conditioned to believe you always had to respond, to fix the problem, to keep everyone happy. But that only applies in healthy relationships. With the narcissist, the more you engage, the more you lose your freedom. And then one day, you realize silence is the strongest declaration you can make. Not a declaration for you. That you no longer need validation. You no longer need closure. You no longer need conversation to heal. You are healing second by second by refusing to let them access your emotions. They won't be able to handle it. You'll try to break your silence. They'll provoke you, try to trigger an emotional reaction. But remember this, every time you don't respond, you take back a piece of the power they once held. And you'll begin to see they start to wobble, they lose direction. They reveal the emptiness you once carried for them, because a narcissist doesn't know how to exist without an audience. You now have stepped away from that seat in the theater. You were once the explainer, the peacekeeper, the one who tried to understand. Now you're the one walking away calmly, quietly, carrying the peace of someone who has chosen not to fight in a rigged game. You didn't defeat them. You conquered yourself. Part 2, setting ruthless boundaries for survival, not approval. In the world of a narcissist, no boundary is sacred. They don't understand the concept of respecting limits. They only understand one thing, control. And if you leave the door even slightly cracked, they'll come in like a flood. So don't just set boundaries. Build walls, lock doors, bolt them with unshakable clarity. And you're not doing it to punish them. You're doing it to protect yourself. In a healthy relationship, you can gently say, I don't like being called late at night, and the other person will understand and respect that. But to a narcissist, that statement is not a request, it's a challenge. And they will test you to see if you really mean it. They'll call repeatedly. They'll call at 2. They'll call just to check on you, not because they need you, but because they need to prove they still have control. And if you answer, if you hesitate, if you forgive without action, they win. That's why your boundaries must be ruthless. Not so you become harsh, but so you become so clear, so firm that no one can slip through the cracks. You don't say, I wish you wouldn't do that anymore. You say, if you do that again, I will cut off contact, and I will do it immediately. Ruthless boundaries don't require lengthy explanations, no justifications, no apologies. They are a declaration of self-worth, a promise you make to yourself. I will no longer tolerate what once broke me. And then comes the test. They won't back down. They'll probe your limits. They'll pretend to apologize, pretend to change. They'll play the victim. They'll cry, beg, shift the blame. Don't soften. Don't react the way you used to. Don't dismantle the boundary you worked so hard to build. Remember this, if you don't enforce your boundaries with clarity and resolve, the narcissist will take it as a signal that you're not ready to let them go. And they'll come back, this time more subtle, more convincing, even making you believe that giving them another chance is the compassionate thing to do. But the truth is, they don't learn from your words. They learn from consequences. Take action. When a boundary is crossed, no debates, no explanations, no trying to convince them that you're serious. You don't need to prove anything with words. You prove it with action. At first, you'll feel harsh. You'll feel too rigid. You'll ask yourself, am I overreacting? Did they really mean it? Should I give them just one more chance? Those questions come from old wounds, from a time when you had to keep the peace by pleasing, from a belief that being quiet would keep things calm. But you don't live in that silence anymore. You're living for real peace, not the illusion that everything's fine. Healthy boundaries have no room for ambiguity. They're not requests, they're conditions for survival. And when you carry them out with consistency, you're not just protecting yourself, you're sending a message to the world, I know what I deserve. If you're exhausted from constantly having to explain what should be obvious, if you're in a relationship where every limit is tested, if you've ever said no and were mocked, guilted, or punished with silence, then this is your sign. It's time for an uncompromising boundary. Start with something small and a clear statement. A firm no, without guilt. Decisive action instead of a long explanation. And with each act, you are relearning how to respect yourself. You don't need to become cruel. You just need to become consistent with yourself, with your limits. With a peace, you're building one boundary at a time. Because in the end, a narcissist cannot survive in a world where you know who you are and are no longer willing to bend. Part 3, emotional stillness. No one can control a mind that has learned to be calm. Staying calm in front of a narcissist isn't just a skill, it's an art. And once you master that art, you don't just confuse them, you save yourself. You see, narcissists don't control you with logic. They don't need your agreement. And they don't even care about your outward obedience. What they truly crave is your emotional reaction, leaving you to snap, to cry, to tremble, to lose composure, anything that proves they still have a grip on your nervous system. Every furrowed brow, every sigh, every tear is a subtle signal that you're still within their influence. And as long as you react, they still hold power. That's why emotional stillness makes them so uneasy. When you no longer react, when your gaze no longer wavers, when your voice no longer trembles, they feel as though they're speaking into a void. And that void becomes a mirror reflecting their own internal emptiness. Imagine this. They throw criticisms at you, cleverly disguised as constructive feedback. They bring up past mistakes. They twist the story, play the victim, flip the narrative. They say things you know are blatant lies, but this time you don't argue, you don't explain, you don't step into the trap. You simply sit there, eyes calm, face serene, expression neutral, not because you feel nothing, but because you choose not to give them access to your emotions anymore. At first, this will be difficult. You'll hear a voice inside whispering, I have to say something, Rich. If I stay silent, won't they think I'm wrong? And it's giving up. But remember, sometimes not reacting is the most powerful response. And because narcissists aren't seeking understanding, they're seeking resistance. Because when you resist, they have something to manipulate. When you remain still, they lose the stage. And here's the miracle. Emotional stillness doesn't make you weak. It brings you back to your center. You no longer dance to the rhythm of provocation. You no longer let emotions dictate your words. You no longer seek validation from someone who never truly listened. Narcissists hate emotional stillness. They despise a lack of response because it forces them to confront themselves. And that is what they fear most. They'll try to provoke you. They'll push you to your limits. They'll scream, then act kind, then lash out again, all just to get a reaction. But you are no longer the person you once were. You're not playing that game anymore. Emotional stillness is not numbness. It is mastery. Mastery of self. Mastery of your reactions. Mastery of the choice not to give power to someone who once suffocated your spirit. You still feel, but you no longer perform those feelings for them to control. They still have a heart, but it no longer belongs in their hands. And then something fascinating happens. They lose direction. They don't know where to poke. They don't know which buttons still work. And when they realize there's no way to make you explode, they begin to unravel in their own frustration. If you've ever felt like a puppet pulled by emotional strings, angry one moment, pleading the next, collapsing under pressure, this is the moment you cut those strings. Learn to hold your ground in the frequency of stillness. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough that you no longer need to fight. You regret this, but you'll fall into the emotion trap. You will bash out, but you don't need to react to prove you're right. You know you're right. And that is enough. From now on, whenever the narcissist tries to provoke you, remember you standing at the center of your own being, no longer a puppet in their performance, no longer an emotional supplier for their manipulation, no longer seeking acceptance from a place where love never truly existed. You are yourself, calm, grounded, unshakable, no longer pulled into the storm. Part 4, emotional starvation. When you deny them the one thing they live for, attention. A narcissist doesn't live off love. They live off attention. They don't need your forgiveness. They don't need your trust. All they need is your reaction. As long as you're still thinking about them, still revolving around them, they're fed. Whether it's through anger, hatred, sadness, or longing. It all holds value to them because in the moment you react, you're feeding energy into their fractured ego. When you send a message, even just to say, I don't want to talk to you anymore, they still receive what they crave. Attention. When you like one of their posts on social media, even out of politeness, they read one message: I still exist in your mind. And that alone is a win for them. To break that cycle, you must do the opposite of what your emotions scream for. Withdraw. Completely. Leave no emotional echo behind. No final message. No triptych Instagram story. No lingering look during the last encounter. Nothing. Just a cold, merciless silence. A disappearance without a goodbye. It says it's punishment, but it's recovery. The narcissist doesn't fear your hatred. They fear your indifference. They don't fear being talked about. They fear being forgotten. They don't fear you leaving in rage. They fear you leaving in peace, because that's when they know they've become invisible in the world they once dominated. Your attention is a kind of energy they cannot generate on their own. They lack inner sustenance. They survive off the reactions of others. And when you stop supplying it, they begin with attention starvation isn't the silent treatment as a form of reverse manipulation. It's you intentionally cutting off the emotional supply from a toxic relationship. You're not being cold because you lack empathy. You're being distant because you finally understood that kindness is not always healthy, especially when that kindness is exploited to keep you trapped. A narcissist won't let you disappear easily. They'll find ways to reconnect through fake apologies, by playing the victim, by bringing up beautiful memories, or worse, by sending you an urgent message designed to trigger your empathy. Don't fall for it. Every time you respond, even just a little, they know the door isn't fully closed. And just like that, you're back at square one, sleepless, restless, lost. Once again, blaming yourself for just one moment of weakness. But you know what? You deserve more than just temporary peace. You deserve a life that is truly free. If you've ever felt like you were living for someone else, constantly wondering what they think, how they feel, how they'll react, this is your reminder. You were not born to be someone's emotional fuel. You are born to feel whole within yourself. And the first step toward reclaiming that wholeness is to disconnect from the person who made you question your worth. Attention is energy, and you have the power to choose where to place it. Focus it on them, and the cycle continues. Focus it on yourself, and the chains begin to break. A narcissist doesn't fall apart because they lost you. They fall apart because they can no longer see themselves reflected in your confused gaze. Because when you walk away without looking back, you extinguish the illusion that they are still the center of your universe. And in that moment, they don't just lose you, they lose the starring role in the script they once controlled. If you're exhausted by invisible battles, if you've fallen into the empathy trap, if you've ever apologized for overreacting, this is your moment to stop. Stop to rest. Stop to awaken. Stop to be free. Let your silence ring out like a declaration. I'm done playing this game. I choose me. Part 5, living better without proving. When your success becomes the final response. Nothing shatters a narcissist faster than seeing you thrive without them. They don't fear your anger. They don't fear your hatred. They don't fear you telling the world what they did. Because all that it still means you're thinking about them. It still gives them a role in the story of your life. But when you go quiet, or you stop mentioning them, when you stop trying to prove something, stop hoping for an apology, stop living in reaction, they realize they've been completely erased from your world. And that's something they can't handle. A narcissist doesn't need your love. They just need your attention. Because attention, whether positive or negative, is validation that they still have an effect on you. And then one day, you stop watching. You stop trying to show them. You stop living as a statement that you're doing better than they are. You no longer need your life to be a performance. You just need it to be real. You wake up in the morning without a tightness in your chest. You go for a walk without having to brace yourself. You play music and smile, and it's not forced. You say no without explaining yourself. And little by little, you begin to understand freedom isn't some grand achievement. Freedom is when you no longer need anyone's permission to live in your truth. When you're truly doing well, you don't need to post happy photos. You don't need to announce to anyone that you've moved on. You don't need to lace hidden messages into your status updates. But you don't need to pretend to be okay, because you are okay, not as a denial of pain, but as a result of bravely walking through it. And that true inner peace is something a narcissist will never have. They live at a constant state of needing attention, needing validation, needing to be the center of everything. They feed off your gaze, your compliments, your envy, even your rage. But when you live your life without them as the axis of your story, you collapse their entire control system. Revenge isn't about making them suffer. True revenge is not needing revenge at all. It's not holding on to them, not even hatred. It's when you say, I don't need closure, I need a new beginning. They might still watch you from afar. They might poke around, trying to reappear as someone who's changed. They might try to stir old memories to test if you still have a soft spot, but this time we don't react. Not because you hate them, but because they're simply no longer part of your present picture. If you're exhausted from trying to prove you're okay, if you've been chasing a stronger version of yourself just to make the one who hurt you regret it, this is your reminder. You don't have to look healed. You just have to keep living authentically for yourself. And if you're just beginning that journey, subscribe to this channel now. Not because you need someone to walk you through it, but because you deserve a daily reminder that you're not alone, you're not lost. You are on the right path. The life you're building isn't a competition with anyone. It's a sacred space where you get to be yourself without fear of distortion. A space where happiness isn't something you have to prove, but something you can breathe in, rest in, and fully live. You don't need them to admit what they did. You don't need them to witness your success. You don't need them to know a single detail about your new life, because this story finally isn't about them anymore. Radical truth, when you speak the truth without permission. A narcissist can handle criticism. They can endure your anger, but what terrifies them to the core is the truth. The cold, blunt truth, unfiltered, unapologetic, unvarnished. A truth that doesn't ask for permission. A truth that doesn't seek approval. Not a truth meant to reconcile. Not a truth meant to negotiate. Not a truth to make them understand. A truth that allows you to stop living in a lie. A narcissist doesn't live in reality. They live in a script. A script where they're either the victim or the hero. And everyone else, including you, is expected to play their assigned role. If you react strongly, they call you too sensitive. If you stay quiet, they label you cold and unempathetic. If you speak clearly, they laugh and say you're overreacting. It's all a tactic to maintain control. But one day, You stop playing. You look at them and say, I see what's happening. I no longer doubt myself. And I'm done playing his role in your script. You don't scream. You don't cry. You don't tremble. You simply speak with the calm of someone who has awakened. Radical truth isn't meant to change the narcissist. It's an act you do for yourself, for your mental health, for your dignity, for your self-respect. You don't speak the truth to be believed. You just speak it so you no longer betray yourself. And be prepared. They will panic. They'll dismiss you, deny, mock. They'll twist the truth, assign blame, throw sarcasm. They'll tell you you're too negative, that you're destroying the relationship. Why? Because truth destroys the control structure they work so hard to build. When you calmly name their manipulative behaviors, gaslighting, role reversal, distorting reality, emotional abuse, you're not just protecting yourself. You're shining a light on the monster they most desperately try to hide, the truth about themselves. Radical truth doesn't need approval. You don't need them to acknowledge it. You only need to stop denying it yourself. And when you speak that truth calmly, clearly, without defensiveness, you extinguish your fire of manipulation they once used to cloud your vision. Radical truth can be as simple as, healers, I don't agree with how you're speaking to me. I'm not responsible for emotions you created and then blamed on me. I see how you twisted this conversation to avoid accountability. Your long explanation. You don't need to preach morality. You don't need to beg for understanding. You just need to stand firm in clarity. And in that very moment, when you refuse to doubt yourself, when you refuse to walk the mental maze they've laid out, you reclaim ownership of your own mind. If you've ever lived in a state of confusion, constantly feeling like something isn't right but unable to name it, then this is your moment to learn how to name the truth. No raised voice. Don't need to convince anyone else. Just a steady knowing, this is my truth and I stand by it. Hit that subscribe button if you're learning how to break free from the fog of deception. We don't just talk about narcissists here. We help you rebuild your inner system of perception, where clarity is your standard, not a luxury. You don't need to win an argument. You just need to stop losing the war inside yourself. And that begins with truth. A truth that is clear, unapologetic, non-negotiable, unshaken. Because you know what? Narcissists can manipulate a confused mind, but they don't touch a soul that stands rooted in truth. Part 7. Rewriting the story. When they're no longer the main character in your life, one day you'll wake up and realize you don't think about them anymore. Not because you forced yourself to forget, but because they no longer play a role in the story of your life. They're no longer the main character, no longer the villain, no longer a lingering shadow clinging to your memories. They simply disappear from your emotional frame of reference, not because of thought, but because you made the conscious choice to rewrite the story. You once lived like a satellite orbiting around them, once defined yourself through their gaze, once let them paint you with distorted words like dumb, too weak, too sensitive. No one else will put up with you like I do. But then one day, you stopped writing from the script they gave you. She added the old chapter with the pen you finally picked up for the first time in a long time. From that moment, you began rewriting everything. You rewrote who I am. You rewrote what I deserve. You rewrote what I will never tolerate again. And with every word you wrote, every choice you made, every decision taken for yourself, you cut another thread tying you to the one who once manipulated your mind. Don't be mistaken. They'll still try to return. Not because they miss you, but because they missed the power they once held. They'll knock on the door with the same voice, the same too late apologies, or even intentional silence designed to reopen old wounds. But this time, you won't open the door. Not because you're cold, but because they're no longer part of the story you're writing. You don't need a final chapter written by them. You just need a begin chosen by you. And that is true liberation. No need for closure. No need for apologies. No need for anyone to validate that you've moved on. Just a simple, quiet truth. You are living freely, authentically. You don't need to post happy photos to prove anything. You don't need to tell your friends that you don't think about them anymore. You don't need them to see that you're okay, because true peace doesn't need an audience. It only needs you in the quiet, private space of your own life, breathing without a heavy chest, sleeping without jolting awake, smiling without pain hidden underneath. And in that moment, you realize victory isn't when they suffer from losing you. Victory is when you no longer need to win. A narcissist will never understand that, because to them, every relationship is a battle. The wins, who controls me, who claims the spotlight. But you're not in that arena anymore. You've left the stage. You've stopped performing. You've retired to yourself. If you're in the process of rewriting your story but still hesitating, thinking things like, can I really live well? Can I be happy even if no one ever knows what I've endured. Let me tell you this, no one needs to know as long as you know. As long as you live each day fully, with freedom in your heart, no longer controlled by anyone else. Hit the subscribe button now if you're on the journey of rebuilding yourself. Because what's coming next isn't just psychological analysis. It's a light for your path forward. A path where you no longer carry the weight of manipulation, but instead walk with clarity, autonomy, and strength. You once waited for someone to give you permission to be happy. Now, you give that permission to yourself. You once wrote your story using the words they spoke about you. No, you tear up that script and write with your true voice. Once played the role of someone desperate to be understood. Now you are the one to understand yourself. No more rage, no more resistance, no more wedding, only peace, only freedom, and the future no longer controlled by the past. And then you realize this battle was never about winning against them. It was always about reclaiming yourself. Every step you took away from them was an escape. It was an act of courage. Every time you stayed silent in the face of their manipulation, every boundary you set without apology, every truth you dared to speak without needing approval was another chain broken, another layer of their control falling away from your mind. You once believed that in order to be free, they needed to change. But now you know the truth. Freedom doesn't come when they finally understand you. It comes when you finally understand yourself. A narcissist doesn't disappear just because you walked away. You only truly fade into nothingness when you stop living in opposition to them. When you stop letting them control your emotions. When you stop writing the next chapter of your life based on the trauma they offered. Because the real victory isn't when they admit their wrongs. It's when you no longer need them to. And in that moment, when you're standing on your own 2 feet, no longer trapped, no longer seeking validation, no longer torn between forgiveness and justice, you realize you've overcome. Not them, you. No one else needs to know. No one else needs to believe it. You just need to know this one thing. You did what many never find the strength to do. You walk away from a toxic relationship and chose to live a life that's truly your own. If these words stirred something inside you, if you feel like you spent too long living a role someone else wrote for you, then let this be your turning point. Where you are the center, where your voice matters, where you no longer let someone else's silence define your worth. Hit that subscribe button today, and let's walk this healing journey together. A path that may not promise ease, but will always be worth it. Stick around until the end, because the upcoming videos won't just help you spot manipulation. They'll equip you with the mindset, the strength, and the resilience to never return to that darkness again. You are not alone. You are not invisible, and you are no longer under their control. Freedom is the destination. Freedom is the person you choose to become.